Mesoamerican cultures, 500 BCE to CE 700. By 500 BCE, the Olmec civilization was withering, but its seeds had spread to other fertile areas in Mesoamerica. In high valleys of the Mexican interior, thriving urban centers like Monte Alban and Teotihuacan arose by CE 200. Teotihuacan was one of the world's largest cities, with a population approaching 100,000. Maya civilization was still developing in the lowlands to the south. It would not peak until after CE 600. We will discuss them later. When Teotihuacan declined, and Mayan city-states such as Palenque and Copan emerged from its shadow. Those sites were not the first urban centers constructed by the Maya. As early as 600 BCE, they were building ceremonial complexes much like those fashioned by the Olmec, consisting of plazas, temples, and residences for the elite who ruled. The most impressive of those early Maya city-states in the jungle of the Petén in northern Guatemala were enterprising villagers cleared trees and dug drainage ditches to transform swamp into farmland. Surpluses of food and labor supported the construction of a ceremonial center at El Mirador, which sprawled over 6 square miles and contained some 200 structures. The work there continued for generations and may have overtaxed the villagers and their soil, undermining the leadership. El Mirador collapsed around CE 150, a few centuries after it was started, but later, Maya urban centers proved stronger and more durable. Monte Alban, built on a hilltop overlooking the Oaxaca Valley by people called the Zapotec, had a long life, emerging as a major population center by 350 BCE and lasting more than 1,000 years. A ceremonial complex, it was also a full-fledged city-state with as many as 30,000 inhabitants and a domain of more than 200 subject villages. Like the others in the region, the Zapotec sacrificed prisoners in the belief that blood offerings to the gods would sustain their society. Pyramids at Monte Alban resembled those built later by the Aztec, with platforms on top where sacrifices and other rituals might be performed. Sculptors adorned the building with figures of sacrificial victims and decorated another with severed heads. The development of writing and the high-level artistry at Monte Alban indicate that here, as elsewhere in the world, the rise of powerful states could be both brutal and beneficial. Like the Romans, the Zapotec were cruel to their enemies and liked blood sports, engaging in a ball game resembling one played by the Maya. But here, as in Rome, ruthless militarism bred success that supported scribes, artists, architects, and engineers who built a reservoir that trapped rainwater and channeled the surplus to fields surrounding the city. Monte Alban was not nearly as big as Imperial Rome, but Teotihuacan approached that scale. Teotihuacan was the first of several great urban centers, including the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan and modern-day Mexico City, to arise in the Valley of Mexico, a 3,000 square mile basin whose lakes and marshes abounded with fish and fowl that offered a fertile foundation for agriculture. Farmers drained wetlands and created raised fields called chinampas. Nurtured by the environment, Teotihuacan emerged around 100 BCE as the planned capital of a powerful state that dominated the entire valley. The Aztec believed that the sun god and other deities had emerged from the earth here at the dawn of time and dubbed the site Teotihuacan, or place of the gods. Planners laid out the city on a grid bisected by a broad thoroughfare known as the Avenue of the Dead. Towering above it was the monumental Pyramid of the Sun, built over a cave that had long been a place of worship. Like the Zapotec, Teotihuacanos were fierce warriors and sacrificed captives to consecrate their temples. They grew great not only through conquest but also through trade. Many of the 150,000 people who inhabited the city at its peak were artisans who lived in cramped apartments and toiled in workshops, turning out objects exported to distant peoples such as the Maya, who were much influenced by the Teotihuacanos. That influence waned as the rulers of Teotihuacan exhausted the resources of their land and people. Beginning around CE 600, the great city-state declined and ultimately collapsed in flames, leaving the Maya as the dominant culture in Mesoamerica. South American cultures, 500 BCE to CE 600. The first complex societies in South America developed between the Peruvian coast and the Andean highlands. Beginning about 500 BCE, the highland ceremonial center of Chavan den Huantar, situated at an elevation of 10,000 feet, became a magnet for worshippers from a wide area. Several thousand people settled there. Many more came to trade or take part in rituals. The heart of the complex was a U-shaped temple, its open courtyard facing east toward the rising sun, and the Amazonian rainforest, home to beasts whose spirits were worshipped here, including the jaguar. Most likely, the propagators of the Chavan cult came from the rainforest and found a following among people living among the western slopes of the Andes, where rain was scarce and the water flowing down from the mountains was a source of wonder and fertility. We must note here that most cultures that were around rainforests and such were mostly polytheistic, and that cultures that were mostly in deserts had a tendency to become more monotheistic. The elite at Chavan did not establish a kingdom, but their artistry and beliefs influenced cultures throughout the region. Other highland ceremonial centers arose during this period along the shores of Lake Titicaca, but the most important cultural developments occurred in the Peruvian lowlands, where well-organized societies emerged among the Moche to the north and the Nazca to the south. These societies grew and prospered through irrigation efforts that extended the amount of farmland in otherwise arid country. The Moche originated in the river valley of that name in northern Peru. Beginning around CE 100, they came together as a state and carried out massive irrigation projects, digging canals that extended as far as 75 miles. Here, as elsewhere in the world, such large-scale efforts to increase the amount of land under cultivation required strong leadership and rewarded the Moche with agricultural surpluses that supported rulers, artists, warriors, and laborers. Wealthier and better organized than their neighbors, the Moche expanded into adjacent river valleys and waged war on people who resisted their advances. Their fighting men wielded copper axes and heavy wooden maces that were used to stun captives, who were later sacrificed to the gods, among them a long-fanged feline resembling a jaguar shown feasting on sacrificial victims. The Moche did not record their history in writing, but they told of their traditions in remarkable works of art, including exquisite golden masks revealing the treasures buried in ancient Greece by the Mycenaeans. Such masterworks by Moche metalworkers contained mostly copper but looked like pure gold. Many were found in Saipan in northern Peru, where warrior priests who claimed captives in battle and sacrificed them were buried with their riches. These fearsome lords of Saipan were among the figures portrayed in clay by Moche potters of great skill, who left posterity a vivid tableau of their society, including scenes of helmeted warriors clubbing their enemies, healers laying hands on the sick, brewers concocting maize beer, and a midwife gently drawing an infant from its mother's womb. Moche laborers used millions of adobe bricks to construct a monument named Huaca del Sol, Pyramid of the Sun, that may have served as a palace, and one called Huaca de la Luna, Pyramid of the Moon, that may have been a temple. Those impressive buildings, decorated with splendid wall paintings, were the products of a regimented society that was approaching the grandeur of Mesoamerican civilizations like the Olmec and Maya before it began to decline about CE 600. Environmental factors such as drought, flooding, and earthquakes might have contributed to the downfall of the Moche and undermined the leadership. Outside invasion also might have been a factor. Around the same time, similar environmental and social stresses to the south may have contributed to the downfall of the Nazca, who had prospered for centuries in a desert rendered fruitful by irrigation canals linked to the Nazca River, and other waterways descending from the mountains. Although they lived much as the Moche did, farming irrigated fields, fishing the rich coastal waters, and hunting in the foothills of the Andes, the Nazca had different customs and beliefs. They cut off the heads of their victims, for example, rather than slitting their throats as the Moche did, and they buried their dead in a distinctive manner, seated in a wicker basket and wrapped in a cotton shroud, along with gifts of food and handiwork. Nazca weavers were masters at embroidering cotton and wool fabrics with intricate designs, including the haunting image of a mythic figure or god with huge staring eyes, known as the oculate being. Religious impulses may have inspired the Nazca to create huge line drawings in the desert that could be viewed in their entirety only from above. Great effort went into forming these so-called Nazca lines, created by removing dark gravel at the surface and exposing the lighter soil beneath. Some were in fact straight lines leading to well-watered areas of obvious importance to the Nazca. Others were geometrical designs that might have had astronomical significance, or monumental pictures of birds and other creatures whose outlines could not be distinguished at ground level. Perhaps they were meant to be appreciated by spirits who inhabited the sky or distant mountain tops, and brought the grateful Nazca water, food, and other blessings.